Hello, family. I'm Janaya Future Khan, and this is Dark Woke. Just before we begin, I want to say thank you so much to all the listeners out there. And if you're a supporter of the show, it really means the world to me. Thank you. You are the people who make it possible. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, we'll have the Patreon link in the write-up below. We got to get into today's episode now. Every time I have to do that part, I try to be normal, and then immediately I sink into this unhinged, brain-rotted, somewhat brilliant mind that is trying to make sense of why we're in hell. Because we're in hell. That much is true. It is what happens when we let the earth go ghetto. But this particular episode, I am excited about. We're talking about Ezra Klein versus Ta-Nehisi Coates. They had a debate following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And, well, explosive for me. If you're a political nerd, this is your Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. This is that, but Joe Frazier is a twink lib from California. That's where it comes in. If you're a hardcore leftist, this is more like a Joe Louis, the Bronze Bomber versus Max Schmeling, Hitler's champion who actually ended up, not caring all that much for Nazism, but that's another story for another time. I had to make a sports reference for the boys. Is that gender essentialist? Okay. Anyway, this whole episode is what happens when you put two of the most prominent thinkers in America in the ring, facing off against each other with the backdrop of fascism. So let me break down the timeline before we get into the debate, because the steps leading up to it were just as fiery. Charlie Kirk gets assassinated on September 10th. Now, most of us are very familiar with Charlie Kirk. He's one of the founders of Turning Point USA. What he's known for are two things. One, doing a lot of debates on campus. He holds what people call debates. We're going to have some takes on that because I don't necessarily agree with that framing, but okay. He does debates on campus. He tries to drum up support for conservatives and was instrumental, actually, for the Trump administration's win for a youth vote. The other thing that he's known for is being a raging bigot. Now, depending on which side of the political aisle you stand on, that apparently makes a huge difference, unless that person dies, right? Unless that person dies. And then suddenly there's this, sanitizing, almost as if, well, we don't need to bring up those things, or those things are not that important. It feels like it's pretty important because when we're talking about the legacy of someone, right? Someone's legacy, the things that they leave behind, the things that they helped build, it matters. It matters. So, a liberal, Ezra Klein, who's one of the most prominent political pundits in America, had a strong opinion about what we should take away from the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're going to start there. I'm going to move you into Ta-Nehisi Coates' response, and then I'm going to tell you what happens when they got together. So let me break it down. After Charlie Kirk gets assassinated, the entire Trump administration and Trump himself weaponized the whole American political system, the entire apparatus, right, of its political system to weaponize against the left. Who is the left in this case? We don't know because we haven't left our homes yet, but we're getting there. We are getting there. That we are going to fight, I'm not worried about. It's how. We're in a process of studying the limits of legality in America right now. So what happens when the president says, actually, no, I'm going to use this and I'm going to go after every single leftist institution, leftist ideology, leftist person to make it clear. It wasn't really about Charlie Kirk at all. It was very much about, oh, this is a great thing for our political agenda. Even so, he was lauded, this is Charlie Kirk, across the board, right? No time was wasted in blaming the left. And it didn't seem to matter very much that there wasn't a single iota of fact or truth or evidence that had anything to do with the left. And in fact, what we've discovered since then, it was a regular guy. It was a regular guy who was so disturbed by the normalization of hate that Charlie Kirk helped to usher into the American consciousness that he simply had to take action, right? Now, you can debate the action all you want, but to me, that is such an indictment of our political leadership across the board. So, what was it in Ezra Klein's piece that was so hard for so many of us to hear? Okay, so the day following Charlie Kirk's death, Ezra Klein, again, one of the most prominent liberal pundits in America, he writes an opinion piece in the NY Times, right? And it's called Charlie Kirk Practiced Politics the Right Way. I'm going to tell you some of the arguments that he made, right? So he says, you can dislike much of what Kirk believed, but this statement is true. This is what Ezra Klein says, right? That Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. He was showing up to campuses and talking with anyone who would talk to him. He was one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion. I beg to differ, sir. But anyway, he goes on to say, when the left thought its hold on the hearts and minds of college students was nearly absolute, Kirk showed up again and again to break it slowly. Then all at once he did, right? And then Ezra references Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk's influence, right, on young conservative Americans and how it helped to shape the 2024 election. There's a lot to, you know what? I'm putting a little button in myself because I will tell you what I think about it afterwards. The other thing that Ezra Klein argues is, one move that the left did was to wrap Kirk's death around his views, right? To Ezra, well, that's not really what we should do, right? He did, after all, defend, free speech, right? And with that means that Charlie Kirk might have said that he's okay if innocent people die to see through his own agenda. It's about the free speech that he embodied, right? And that American politics has sides, and that's just a given because it's America, right? And as that list that he references suggests, and the list is, of course, that, yes, Charlie Kirk was a free speech advocate, but, he did suggest that some people should die. He never once, by the way, Ezra Klein never once quoted a single thing that Kirk said once, right? This guy practices politics the right way, but never once thought to bring up a quote from him. That, to me, is telling in of itself. But with free speech comes somebody's right to say that certain people deserve to die, even if they are, in fact, innocent. So for Ezra, American politics has sides, right? But both sides are meant to be on the same side of a larger project. These are quotes from him. We are all, or most of us anyway, trying to maintain the viability of the American experiment. We can live with losing an election because we believe in the promise of the next election. We can live with losing an argument because we believe that there will be another argument. Political violence imperils that. So it was a really short piece, but in it, he kind of lists what he sees as the normalization of political violence. So Pelosi's house getting broken into, right? Where her husband got hit on the head with a blunt object. Or how about the fact that Gretchen Whitmer, I like how that bird looks. She talks crazy, Curious if she ever goes for a presidential run. Anyway, we'll talk about Big Gretchen another episode, okay? There's a whole attempt to abduct her that the FBI was able to intervene on. We've seen assassinations of liberal and Democratic council people, right? Political violence, as Ezra Klein sees it, is increasing, and it imperils our ability to say what is on our mind, to speak, to persuade, and this is how, in fact, we have to practice politics. Here's my take on this, right? I found this piece incredibly hollow and disturbing. Number one, it was so clear to me that his understanding, including, I would say that Ezra Klein is a very good representative of liberalism in America, right? liberalism means a bunch of things, but Klein is a good example of it. He's striving. He's trying to figure it out. He generally has good politics, but he's talking about building power. He wants to see change. I think all of those things sound nice. That doesn't mean that you're good at what you do or that you're smart, or maybe you were for a different era, because what I don't understand, what I am struggling to wrap my head around is I don't think he understands what political violence is, right? For him, political violence isn't what Charlie Kirk said, normalized, and then we watched it get written into policy. Political violence is an assassination against the politician. Political violence, right, isn't leveraging your large Republican donors' money to spread bigoted beliefs and hatred, right? No. That then get normalized and caught, because we're talking about the status quo, right? Kwame Ture says, if the white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If he has the power to lynch me, that's my problem, right? So not only is his definition of political violence, it seems very myopic in view, and also seems to only speak to political actors, right? Like literal politicians, which I think is fascinating, especially in American politics and how they're understood. But the other thing that I find annoying about this is, did you ever stop to think why they were on college campuses, where that funding came from, how this was all part of the right-wing apparatus? There's so much more that could be said in this piece, but it's been beaten like a very, very old, tired, you know what? I was going to think of an animal and it made me sad. A Republican. Okay. No, because then we wouldn't stop. I'm going to keep going. This is not how this was supposed to go. Okay. We got to keep moving. Klein, that piece really got under my skin. I was wrinkled, but that's not what we're here to discuss. I'm going to go back to it, but what is revealed in the coming days after that piece is what matters here. Am I saying that Ezra Klein is a raggedy bitch? No. I'm saying that he is both a little raggedy and also it's a both end situation. Okay. 5 days after Klein's op-ed, Ta-Nehisi Coates writes a scathing response in Vanity Fair, right? For those of you a little less familiar with Charlie Kirk, this piece is paramount. It is paramount. I'm going to tell you something. If I said some shit and then Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a piece on me, I would not read it. I would pack up and move. I'm going to Greenland. I'm going where there's some ice left, and I'm just going to cool out, because it's basically straight Baldwin writing about you. And you know what? We don't know. Ta-Nehisi could be gobbling a dick at any moment. I would not know. But I hope he is. If that's what everybody's, you get what I'm saying. I just that people called him the new Baldwin, and I was like, I don't know if I agree with that, but he's a very good writer. I think we can all say he's a very good writer. I would not want to be in the crosshairs of somebody like him. So here are the main arguments that Ta-Nehisi Coates makes against Ezra Klein's op-ed, right? Oof, he goes. In ignoring the rhetoric and actions of the Turning Point USA founder, that's Charlie Kirk, right? Pundits and politicians then participated in sanitizing of his legacy, right? Ta-Nehisi explicitly calls out Ezra Klein for dubbing Charlie Kirk, quote, one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion, and a man who was practicing politics in exactly the right way. And of course, he said these things alongside folks like California Governor Gavin Newsom, right? You might recall that when Governor Newsom thought, you know what? Fascism is here. I'm going to make a presidential run in a couple of years. I got to build power. What can I do? I got to show the people I'm serious. I'm going to start a podcast. Such a basic bitch move. Not only does he do that, his first guest of all people, right, is Charlie Kirk. I've got an episode somewhere back there. Charlie Kirk dog walked his ass. Like, do you know how not good you have to be to get dog walked by Charlie Kirk? Gavin Newsom couldn't say anything to the positions that Charlie Kirk was taking because he was so afraid of taking a position on anything himself, lest it damage the people's political opinions of him. But also, we don't know what a lot of these establishment Dems believe. They talk in code speak, and what the right has been able to do effectively, because they're so well funded and because they invest so much time and energy into it, is they've got great propaganda machines. They know exactly what to say and they know how to say it, right? So somebody explicitly says, "Hey, woman, go make me a sandwich." What do you? Hey, don't say that. Hey, not, "Hey, go fuck yourself." That's not what happens. Instead, it's like yeah. Well, that's one way to look at it. No, Newsom, that's not where we're at now. You are not the Great Gatsby, nigga. Chill out. Give us some passion. But it wasn't just Gavin Newsom, right, who hailed Kirk's passion and commitment to debate, right? And not only did Gavin Newsom do it, he said, this is a moment where we can reach across ideology, right? We can do it through spirited discourse. A writer from The Atlantic, Sally Jenkins, saluted Charlie Kirk, claiming he, quote, argued with civility, and his death was a significant loss for those who believe engagement can help bridge disagreements. There are some words you're going to keep hearing, right? Bridge the gap, engagement, debate, right? Spirited debate. So Coates goes on to argue, right, that these aren't just disagreeable views. That's one of the things that they love saying. These are just disagreeable views. We all just don't feel the same way about it. No, these are not just disagreeable views. Disagreeable views are being pro-life, right? Or believing in the death penalty. Now, these things are incredibly politically loaded. I want to make sure that you know that I'm using a very robust definition of disagreeable views, right? If you are somebody who believes in the death penalty, yuck, right? But there's been a lot of Democrats, there's been a lot of folks who believe that. We've had pro-life Democrats help, usher in some great policies that people have benefited from and things like Medicaid, et cetera. But that is part of what has been historically normal in America, right? Of course, Kirk also disagreed that church and state should be separate. He wanted a type of fascist theocracy. So Coates is saying those are more or less normal for the precedent in American history. No. Coates is arguing, right, that Charlie Kirk reveled in open and extreme bigotry, and the idea that we could refer to this guy as civil and this whole civility is really hard to square with his constant need to demean and dehumanize marginalized communities, right? LGBTQ people are freaks. First of all, kind of, right? But we embodied that. You just look like that. That's a lot. Okay, I'm just saying, okay? He called trans folks tranny, and you know what? Look, I'm a comedian. I'm on a stage. I can live with that. I'm going to get you back, but I could live with that. But these aren't even the worst things, okay? What made him so insidious is he didn't just say, hey, tranny, hey, there's too much of the alphabet mafia running around. No. He said gays should be stoned to death. The LGBTQ community, and particularly trans folks, right? They're pedophiles. Right, it's all about grooming. I can throw you some actual quotes that he made, including that obviously inferring that black women had sub IQs. Here we go. Yeah, the lesbian, gay, transgender garbage all in their school. That he didn't want kids to have to hear the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day, and that the American way of life and Christendom, was under threat. He believed in the Great Replacement theory. Right. He didn't want he said Harris wanted to kidnap your child via the trans agenda, right? He habitually, something he loved to talk about was black people. He was obsessed with talking about black people, right? Obsessed. He habitually said black crime was on the rise. This is a direct quote. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. He said that Haitians were going to come infest. They were infested in the country with their demonic voodoo, and their migrants were going to run around, quote, raping your women and hunting you down at night, right? And here's the thing. There was cognitive dissonance, as there is in so many things in America. For him, it wasn't personal to specific people, right? These were blanket statements against everybody. It was useful always to target black women, specific black women, whether they were Supreme Court judges or governors. He made a point to target singular trans people. I'm thinking of Leah Thomas, right, in this case. But here's the most damning thing that Coates had to write to anyone who tried to sanitize Charlie Kirk's legacy. This is what got me so hot. It wasn't just Charlie Kirk. Like, Charlie Kirk is the face, right? And what a mug to choose, but he was the face of Turning Point, right? They were going for something oblong. And so, and that's what happens when you can't circle politics that don't make sense. But it wasn't just him. The entire leadership of Turning Point is known for their blanket racism. This is what somehow a thing that everybody seemed to miss, right? Not us, but you get what I'm saying. It was the entire institution that he founded, right? Turning Point USA. So Crystal Clanton, this is one of the group's former national field directors, would send texts. This is a direct quote. "I hate black people, like fuck them all. I hate blacks, end of story," right? One of the group's advisors, Rip McIntosh, published a newsletter where he pretended to be essentially a black writer. He had a pseudonym. Cringe is not the word, right? But that black people had become socially incompatible with other races, and that black culture was, quote, an unfixable and crime-ridden mess, right? Meg Miller, who was the president of Turning Point's chapter in the University of Missouri, joked, right, after 3 black football players were killed at another college, if they would have killed 4 more niggers, we would have had the whole week off, right? That's Turning Point USA. Somehow these things never get thought about, talked about, investigated, known. But Charlie, he seemed like such a nice guy. This was the last thing that really stood out to me in Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece, right? He says, what of the writers, the thinkers, and the pundits who cannot separate the great crime of Kirk's death from the malignancy of his public life? Can they truly be so ignorant to the words of a man they have so rushed to memorialize? I don't know, but the most telling detail in Klein's column was that, for all his praise, there was not a single word in the piece from Kirk himself. So what's my take on Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece in Vanity Fair? Yeah, fire. Agree. It was an indictment of Turning Point as a whole. It revealed what was underneath this so thin veneer of civility. A snake can put on a suit, but it's going to strangle you all the same. Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, and this entire GOP establishment, right, headed by Donald Trump and the Trump administration. They are just snakes. Bloated, greedy, rapacious snakes. Charlie Kirk advocated for normalized, right, political violence. Huge proponent of mass shootings. So the question is, why was there such a rush to make this guy out to be a nice guy, a good guy with deplorable thoughts? He said some really disagreeable things. Oh, I don't align with his views at all. But, it's really unfortunate. He seemed like such a great guy. He was so well loved. He was so persuasive. He believed in engagement. He believed in spirited debate, right? This was Charlie Kirk. And yet, how do you circle the square with what we just revealed and what Ta-Nehisi Coates helped to reveal in that piece?
Okay, only 10 more presents to wrap. You're almost at the finish line. But first... there. the last one. Enjoy a Coca-Cola for a pause that refreshes.
Several days after that, another piece rolls out. And I mean, I'm a little bit thrilled. If you're a nerd, this was a good time. It's been ages since a single piece of writing can stop the internet for at least 5 hours. Like, it just hasn't happened. And yours, I've been waiting. It's been so long. And to have back to back to back to back pieces where you got to read to know what's up, I am about that life. Okay. But peep this. A couple days later, the New Yorker puts out a piece called "Can Liberalism Be Saved?" I'm going to spare you. I know I heard the groan. I felt it. I felt it in my soul. It's not essential that we get into that piece, but it revealed another contradiction. So, this is the New Yorker. Isaac Chotiner interviews Cass Sunstein, who's the sort of, lead scholar on liberalism. He's a guy at Harvard. He's a legal scholar, right? But I'm going to tell you something about Isaac. He don't play. I don't know why politicians keep going and sitting in front of this man, because if you say a single thing that does not make sense, he's going to get you. And he does. Get him, Isaac. He's good at that. He's great at that. Okay. But we don't even need to read the piece. And by the way, Sunstein's got a book called On Liberalism. I don't think it's useful right now. If I think a book is useful or even curious making, inducing, I'll read it. But no. It's like, a defense of the idea of liberalism at a time that Sunstein believes it is under threat from both the right and the left. I wish the latter were true. Oh my God, I would live. But here's what's interesting, right? You got this whole thing on liberalism. You said it's under attack, but it doesn't talk about Donald Trump at all, or contemporary politics. It instead provides, and this is Chotiner, a kind of a defense of a general liberal belief system, right? And Sunstein breaks that into 85 features. I was like, absolutely fucking 85 features. And that the definition is very capacious, right? It includes New Deal liberals and so-called classical liberals, and that includes von Hayek. And, that is a charged part. Like, there's some things, Hayek, where you're like, oh, this is gangster. And then you realize that he really doesn't fuck with like Asian. So you're just like, oh, you're weird. You have problems. You're a racist. Here's my favorite part, though. The only thing that you need to take from this piece, right, is Sunstein is very good friends, or has historically been good friends, with Kissinger. The guy who is responsible for actual war crimes. The guy that was like universally disliked and despised for decades. You remember that guy? Remember that guy who like tried to destroy Cambodia? Remember that guy? Remember the guy who set a precedent for foreign policy that just was absolutely deplorable? That guy? Okay, that guy. Right. That guy. Yeah. So when Isaac Chotiner, this journalist from the New Yorker, challenges this bastion of liberalism, or at least what it means in this article, because it's just their interview, he goes, well, how do you, Kissinger kind of did these things. Like, how do you make sense of that? And he goes, well, he was nice to me and he liked my book. He was nice to me and he liked my book. That was the screenshot that went wild over the internet, because it captures liberalism in a very specific definition really well. I would argue in how he's presented himself in this particular time, Ezra Klein is not so different from that. In 2018, Michelle Wolf she hosted the Correspondents' Dinner in the White House. They still were doing that back then. And Donald Trump was president at that time. He didn't like her. She was fucking phenomenal. She was great. But it was in an interview afterwards that really jumped out at me. It made it make so much sense what was going on. So she gets up there and she just rails everybody. It's awesome. It's amazing. The claps happen. Whatever Trump threatens or says he's never going to, it's canceled. The Correspondents' Dinner is canceled forever, right? In an interview a few days, weeks later, Michelle Wolf says, you watch C-SPAN and you see all these things happen. And you think, yeah, these guys hate each other. They're, the Democrats fight the Republicans, and that's how it goes. And the Democrats are on our side. But she said, as soon as the lights were off, they're all friends. They're all buddies. They're all friends and they're all buddies. As soon as the lights were off. And I have not been able to forget that because, it's something that right? But you don't know how much you know until you know. The extent to which it was obvious to her. So I'm going to jump off of that all to say there's clearly in the zeitgeist a conversation that's happening around liberalism and what we do about it. And, do we use it? Do we not use it? Does it matter? Does it not matter? Is it inherently fucked? All of these things, right? Full of contradictions. At the same time, the left is trash. I love us. Oh, God. But where are we? Where are we? We can deconstruct this shit at anything. We can't build shit. We can't build shit. And how I feel about this, low key, we should have never gone to post-secondary. That's what killed us. All we learned how to do is deconstruct. You know what happened? White queers went to schools, went to post-secondary and came back like missionaries and destroyed language, culture, started bringing in this policing. You don't get to say this. We had care. We had community. We had fun. But yeah, people was calling each other tranny and faggot, and that was it. But you know what? You had a place to live. You had mother. You know what I mean? You had culture. Now, if I want to see it, I got to watch Paris is Burning. No, I just got to go to New York. What I'm saying is it's the white queers only. We all still have it. But something happened where it became about deconstruction and deconstruction and deconstruction, and we forgot how to build. We forgot how to build. We forgot the essential the necessity of building power. It became instead the left tradition to merely critique it endlessly and never to build it. And the second that we assume or presume that somebody has moved into a position of power, well, they're an enemy now. We got to tear them down. It's absurd. Where's our tradition, right? That's a good segue for the debate. And oh my fucking God, what a moment. Ta-Nehisi Coates sitting across from Ezra Klein. He writes this piece. He calls Klein out. Ezra's like, what did I do? What? Political violence. Ezra is not a pushover. I think he's also not. I think you have to work really hard to stay smart. Really, 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 really hard. And I think you have to be able to shift past your own worldview. This conversation, I'm going to give you little top lines, play a couple of clips, and then hit you with a take afterwards, because the way that I am trying so hard not to yell into the microphone. It was good. You know what? I'm just gonna play it, okay? I'm just gonna preface it with this. You can find it online anywhere, but I'm gonna preface it with this. Okay. They open up, they talk about the fact that they are friends. Ta-Nehisi Coates has been on the show a bunch of times, okay? I can't say they're super close, but they text each other. And so there's a desire to show respect between the two of them. How many times I've been here? Oh, so many times. And Ta-Nehisi hit pretty hard, pretty fast. I don't know why nobody clipped this. But I also just learned that I have capabilities now. But he goes, Ezra's just like, I felt the need to say something as a liberal, as somebody who cares. It felt really important for me to say this. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates asked if silence wasn't an option. And honestly, ether line, so fucking good. Okay. That is a really good question. Not one that Ezra Klein would ever entertain, but it's a really good question. Why did you have to say this thing? So Ezra says, well, I want to know why are we losing? Right? Why are we losing? So I'm going to play a couple clips for you and break down why they're important. And I'm going to withhold from yelling as much as I possibly can. Here's one of the clips.
I actually think, and I've thought about this a lot in reaction I have read in the last couple of weeks, I've thought a lot about how many people believe we are already in a cold civil war, that we are in a time that we are dealing with divisions and questions. I see it on the right, for sure. I hear it on the left. I have a lot of email that's like, we need a national divorce. How that's going to be effectuated, never exactly clear.
Do people
they do use that.
Do people you respect say that to you?
I'm sorry. Come on. Your friends are dumb. I'm just going to translate. I'm going to help decode. Your friends are dumb is what he's saying. You are talking to dumb people. Right over that man's head.
Well, yes, actually, I will say that. But I'm not going to, people say things to me that are off the record, and I shouldn't say it. But
I have friends. They read sometimes. You know, we talk and they'll tell me their secrets, but I'm not going to tell you that. What? No, I'm only going to vaguely reference something when I want to make a point that I personally don't want to make. Folding like a lawn chair. Yuck.
You don't believe that, right? You don't believe we are at a point. I think it's really important.
Okay. We're going to come back to that. I'm going to hit you with another one right quick, okay?
I don't take any joy in saying this, but we sometimes soothe ourselves by pointing out that love, acceptance, warmth, that these are powerful forces. I believe they are. I also believe hate is a powerful force. I believe it's a powerful, powerful unifying force. And I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. You know, I really need to say this over and over again. I have a politic that rejects violence, that rejects political violence. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, and the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I'd have to tell you it is the usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends.
Here's the thing. When I realized, because you can tell a lot about how people feel based on what clips, for example, or what specific moments stand out for people in conversation. But I happen to know that the majority of people whose work I might sleuth would be inclined to agree with Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ezra he has some really important questions, right? The question of why we're losing. That is something that a lot of people are struggling to answer. I know why, for the record. I just want to be clear. I want to be very clear that I know why. But there are a lot of hypotheses out there, right, that matter. And I'm going to tell you a banger line just to help balance it out that Ezra Klein said, right? He said at this point, right, and he's talking about the left, right, that it's easier for us to imagine an end of the country than to win a Senate seat in a place like Missouri. That's his conversation is located in right now. And one of the biggest moments of tension that happened between them was when, Ta-Nehisi is like, hey, American history guy. And his response was, yeah, let's just locate it in the last 12 years, right? Ta-Nehisi has a long view. He references repeatedly his relationship to a tradition, right? A Black tradition. And that long view is essential to understanding how we got here and where we go from there. At the same time, Ezra is like, I want now. What do we do right now? We have to win seats. We have to stop this from happening. These are not wrong sentiments. In fact, there's a rightness to both of them. And I wish that was more reflective in the conversation around this. At the same time, right? At the same time, how do you ask good questions, right? Or make strong assertions, but then have perhaps one of the least empathetic or intelligent responses to one of the smartest men in America, hands down. I accidentally just closed the clip I was going to use. Just give me a second. Whoops. Okay. No, but okay. I think this whole thing has made me so upset, but in a good way. This should tell us why we have to be everywhere that we need to be. But I want you to just listen to this, okay? Just like peep this.
I think you take very, very seriously the need to convince people outside of the tent right now.
So one of the assertions that Ezra Klein has made over and over again is, hey, we have to go look at the wins that we did have. At one point, right, and remember, he's focusing on the last 12 years, there were 40 Democrats that were in Congress, right, collectively, that were pro-life. And he said, that is where we were most effective. Here's the rub. I didn't tell you this because I knew it was going to upset you. Because it upset me so much. He opened this shit up, Ezra Klein, with a Hillary Clinton quote. Remember when Hillary Clinton was like, with little Bob, when she was running around, looking like Suge Knight. Remember that? Suge Knight. Remember when she was looking like Suge? Okay. So she called the right deplorables, and he is asserting that our inability to reach across the aisle, right, and have a kind of tolerance for people with, unpopular views or things that might not be consistent with the left or with liberals, that we push them away, and our intolerance helped to create this. And in fact, in that piece that I referenced, can liberalism be saved? There's a question asked of, okay, so you're saying that, do you believe political correctness chase people to the right? And Sunstein is like, yeah, to a point. It's interesting. These assertions. You're starting to see themes, but Ta-Nehisi says you seem really interested in convincing people outside the tent, outside of the tent right now. Right? He goes on to say,
I guess what I want from you is I want you to take as seriously people who are in the tent and who are vulnerable and afraid. And if you have to convince them of something that's extremely, extremely uncomfortable, or tell them that you're taking a position that is extremely uncomfortable, I just think you owe them a little more. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
man.
That's fine. I'll take it.
What the fuck was that? Wait. What the fuck was that? What was that? Did you see that? Did you see how the words just bounced like right up? Yeah, I'll take that. In the most, and listen, I'm not one of these like woo queers. I'm not we got to prioritize the feelings. I'm like, your feelings will be much better if you live in a better world. I'm going to hit that first. At the same time, this complete lack of empathy must be pointed out, right? The thing that makes me so irritated about this was the moment where Ta-Nehisi was supposed to say, no, don't take what? Take what? He can sound like Eartha Kitt. Take what? Take what, right? What is the conclusion that you're drawing from what I said? And apply it back to that piece that he wrote. This whole thing was weird. It was weird. I didn't like it. Okay, now I can say it because I really had to be like, this was explosive. It was the opposite of explosive. It was explosive to me. I imploded inside. This is a haphazardly thrown together broken mirror. I'm furious. I'm so furious. There were so many moments missed. We get so few moments, right? We get so few fucking moments to actually try to figure some shit out. And in that moment, Ta-Nehisi, and I want to be clear, this is not me riding Ta-Nehisi coats. The thing he keeps asserting over and over again is, I know my role. I know where I belong in this. And it's partly why I don't freak out. I see my place in history. I see in terms of how we got here. I see that I have something to contribute, and I must contribute that. That is part of the Black tradition. But he's not an activist, and he's not, he's very much, I'm a scholar and I'm an academic. You need a certain level of diligence and energy to constantly push back on, because these people are thick-headed. You go back to the piece. You put a piece out there that sanitized this man, and you're saying, oh yeah, no, yeah, I hear you. And then you move on and nobody challenges it. And granted, right? We're here. We see it. But this was a moment lost. And it's one of the things that frustrated me in the interest of, we could go check this out. There's so many pieces in this that matter, but the lack of empathy was breathtaking. So I'm going to save us some time because I've demonstrated to you some of the top lines in it. And I did want to say that there's something really important about the fact that Ezra is like, I want to do something. That is how most people feel. And if you are a person who's approaching this from, I want to do something, Ta-Nehisi saying, this isn't even the worst it's been, right? It's not the worst that it's been. These aren't the worst whites we've ever lived around. That can be frustrating because it suggests a kind of progress, right? Really, it's just what happens when you don't think of just 12 years. It's what happens when you don't have a myopic view. But that kind of range, like an ancient turtle, right? Or something in a Navajo, parable to help us understand the world. It's not actionable. And Ezra's in but I want what it's now. And that is the most polite way that I can say it. But now I'm going to eviscerate this whole fucking thing. Okay. Because to be frank, I found the whole dialogue between them flat and fucking irritating. They were circling around something. It felt like there were just moments where, and Ta-Nehisi makes some direct eye contact with the camera, but it's not enough. I found this whole thing flat and irritating. It was like a ball tickle because they were circling around a tension, right? That exists in America. Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates were circling around a tension that exists between every liberal and leftist, right? Between the only really two things that matter in the American consciousness, right? Black people and white people. It is the core tension that exists between black people and white people in America. White people think that black people think and talk about race too much. And black people think that white people think and talk about race too little. And that is always where we fall the fuck apart. We always lose right there. And there was this moment, even now when things are as bad as they are, where if two of the smartest people, or at least that we know of in America, right? Most known, prominent, whatever, can't get together and actually just name it, they're not the ones. They're not the ones, because here's the thing, our inability to actually name that core tension. You guys talk about race too much. You talk about it too little. The right has capitalized on it and won because we simply won't confront it. And the left is immobilized by it, right? What does it mean? These are the two most prominent yappers. Nobody can talk about it. My thing is this. Can we just have the fucking fight already? We have to fight it out. We have to fight it out. I'm going to make my case in this right here, right? Ezra mentioned the fear of a civil war. You heard him do that. He mentions a civil war could be happening. People are afraid it's already happening. This is a moment where you absolutely should revisit the last time a civil war happened, right? Why was it fought? Oh, right. Slavery. Some people in the country wanted to keep slaves so they could keep making money, right? Most commonly known as the South. And some people in the North were like, maybe you shouldn't do that. Let me tell you, they weren't as good as but I'm glad it happened. I'm just going to say I'm glad it happened. But let's really, really synthesize this, okay? The first Civil War happened in America because a bunch of racists and bigots who wanted to keep making money by continuing the hideous enslavement project of Black Americans in the country, they threw a fucking huge tantrum and started a war because of it, right? And what happened? What happened after that? They lose, right? They lose. The racism doesn't go away. They lose and they throw a huge fucking tantrum. And what does America do? America says, okay, no. You're right. You guys fucking suck. You lost. But we really get you. And you know what? Here's all this money to make up for it. And here's all this land to make up for it. Okay. And we're done. And then these little skin tags, these little racist skin tags said, no, we want more. We want and demand equal representation in Congress. We're smaller states. We don't got as many people as you guys do. We deserve equal representation. And those concessions were made. And that is why we have the Electoral College. And this is the thing that sucks, right? This is the thing that sucks. It all goes back to slavery. And it fucking drives me nuts that Black liberation is our best chance at meaningful and lasting change, that applying Black liberation theory, right, is our best chance. And do you know how shitty it is to know that as a Black? It's terrible. It's like, I wish it was anything else. I want to tell you it was something else. Do you know what it's like? People feeling, oh, well, you're trying to one up me. I don't experience that from the right. They don't give a shit. It's in our own spaces. Not when I bring up race, because everybody likes me and listens to me. I'm irresistible, but just generally, okay? And you got to work to be irresistible. There were a few days before I was. Certainly, I've experienced it, but this is why it sucks so bad. It's like, do you know those people who are trying to get you a phone plan in Costco or a better Spectrum deal? And you could save some money, but you don't got time. You're here for Costco. It's Costco. They have donuts. It's like that. Your quality of life in America fucking sucks. And we ended up with this rapacious, gross, bloated ass fucking president. And we just keep staying in this endless cycle. The popular vote doesn't matter. It all goes back to the fucking electoral college. We made concessions for racists, and we have continued to make concessions for racists every generation since, right? We're in a perpetual state of concessions to racists, right? We're a fucking concession stand for the fuggliest fucking skanks in America. That's where we are. They're not even hot. They're not even hot. They're not even hot. We're serving people who literally can't serve. They're so ugly. They're full of hate, right? I want to point something out, right? Because slavery is really far away. Like, how do you know that Black liberation theory is the thing that could help us now? Like, that was a long time. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to civil rights. What was that again? Oh, right. Voting rights, right? Oh, that was the thing that Charlie Kirk was against. Right. That's right. Charlie Kirk was against the Civil Rights Act in America. Votes. Do you want to know how many rights were folded in along with civil rights, from LGBTQ rights to disability rights? Need I remind you that we got Section 504 because one of the Black Panthers had MS and had deep, obviously meaningful relationships with both disabled people, right? And Black people. He was a Panther. So when they occupied this building in San Francisco that didn't even have AC, it was the Panthers who used their media savvy and the attention that they can engender to drive home the need to have some sort of protection and policy in America so that disabled people could exist in public. They simply could not at the time, and can barely now, to be honest. But at least we knew in federal buildings, right? You could have access to things. You could have access to services. Things were codified. We wouldn't have that. We would not have that if it weren't for the civil rights era. It was so hot. They brought fans. They brought food. That's community. It's not just about what you stand for. It's about who you sit with, right? But we don't talk about race. We talk about everything but race. And even I feel that tension. I don't want to talk about it. And it's not because I yap about it constantly, but when it comes to, right, the need, right, the compulsion that I have because I know it works. I've been at this shit for like 20 years now. That's not true. It's like 10 plus, but you get what I'm saying. 20 just sounds better. Sounds like heft. But anyway, I've been at this for too long. I've tried so many schools of thought. Identity is a great entry point into consciousness, but it's not your exit point. Your exit point should be based on a belief system, right? But we should choose a belief system that is the most effective, that saves and protects the most people, right? Who better? There is no stolen land versus stolen labor. Black liberation theory understands indigenous sovereignty. Black liberation theory understands disability rights. Black liberation theory understands gender equity. It understands all of it, right? I want to tell you that we're in a moment, right? The rhetoric that's being normalized now, the way that I can't go anywhere online without seeing some sort of conversation or reel or assertion that blacks are inherently more criminal, lazy, stupid, disgusting, rapey, right? We have our expansion of our detention centers now that are sweeping up and disappearing. Whole minorities, whole migrants, just based on their skin color alone, doesn't matter whether they're born here or not. Where do you think that came from? Where do you think that came from? The expansion of the prison state, which worked tirelessly to incarcerate largely Black Americans. That's why we had the school to prison pipeline, right? And where did that start? Oh, right. That's right. It started with vagrancy laws after slavery was abolished, right? People were already wearing their dumb little stars when they were slave catchers. And it's expanded ever since. That's why we don't have school programs for kids. That's why we don't have lunch programs for kids, because we keep giving money to the police state, which is now expanded into detention centers, and we're seeing it go privatize, get more neoliberal, and we're seeing it over and over and over again. Everybody seems to be making money off of our inability to have a fucking conversation. Just own it. We just have to own it. Do white people think too little about race? Yeah. Do Black people talk too much about it? It depends. It really depends. I know too many folks who should not be in movement spaces right now, right? But those are few and far between, unless you're in Portland, because those nignogs are very annoying. But this is what drives me nuts. You don't have conviction if somebody annoys you or, offends you for talking about race, and now you don't have leftist principles. You don't belong here. You never did, right? But it's not just weak people. We don't seem to be able to talk about it in any meaningful way. Robin DiAngelo didn't figure that out. Where's the armies of whites? Where are the group chats, right? All the people who gave her millions of dollars to talk about white fragility, right? You guys talked about it. What happened? I don't have any more white friends. Where'd you go? Oh, it turns out that you actually can't solve the problem of race in America by only talking to other white people.
We all love a legendary comeback, and Degree Original Cool Rush is back and better than ever. Cool Rush isn't just a scent, it's a movement, a fan favorite that delivers bold, fresh vibes and all-day sweat protection. Whether you have a man that spends hours in the gym, heads into the office early, or is just trying to stay fresh on a long day, Cool Rush has their back. Head to your local Walmart or Target and grab Degree Cool Rush, the fan favorite scent from the world's #1 antiperspirant brand.
If you could understand, right, as liberals, as leftists, if we could all understand that so much of what is wrong in America, so much of why the quality of life for every American has to do with its original sin and the legacies its shadow has cast, why your popular vote doesn't fucking matter, right? You want to know why Ta-Nehisi Coates isn't freaked out or he's not thinking about things actionable? I mean, I would have, but I get it. It's because in the Black radical tradition, we understand how long this fight is. You don't get to have a myopic view. You have to see all of it, because if you understand how it happened, you know how to fucking win. You've studied the playbook. You watched the tape. Liberals seem unable to do that. And here's the thing that I think is the most indicting, right, about liberals. Because I want to be clear, right? I've said explicitly that we haven't had this rhetoric normalized since the civil rights era. And we haven't. This blanket racism, right? And everyone's tacit acceptance of it, right? And I want to be clear about something before I get into the thing that really concerns me. The normalization of this rhetoric doesn't mean that all Americans, or even most of them, are racist. I don't believe that. I don't even believe that across the GOP. It doesn't need to be true, right? It doesn't need to be true. I'm not interested in trying to figure out who the racists are and who's not. No, the normalization of this does not mean that all white people in America are racist, or that most are It doesn't have to mean that. It's what the normalization does. That's what I care about. That's what we care about. It's about power. So in 2016, when Donald Trump was calling immigrants, because that seems to be as far back as liberals can think, when he was calling immigrants and migrants rapists and deplorables and criminals, right? What's happening now? What's happening now? Families are getting broken up. People are getting swept off the street and disappearing. And it's not just migrants. It's anybody. It's anybody and everybody, because it's a game of numbers for them. It has nothing to do with what's right or what's legal. And we know that. That's political violence. Understanding that it's the normalization of the language. So no, it doesn't. I'm not concerned that the majority of people in America are racist. I don't believe it. I don't believe that the majority of white people in America are racist. I actually think it's a very small subset that is openly proud of that. It doesn't require that. It requires our tacit acceptance of racism around us at all times. That, this is really not my fight. I can't believe this is happening. I didn't say. It's why Black folks are quiet right now. We're studying the tape. That's it. And I think it's time. I think it's time that liberals and really white people and some Black folks, but really I just think it's time, right? Because there's the thing that I found most disturbing about this entire thing, outside of the conversation, having the metric tonnage of a mouse fart. I'm concerned that even now, it is easier for white people to relate and to empathize more with a racist simply because they are white than it is for them to relate to any Black person. Because you don't have Black friends. You don't have Black relationships. You don't know Black people. And so I saw something horrific in Charlie Kirk's assassination. I did. I saw something horrific, something that I don't want to see happen again. But I reserve my tears for those who actually need them. Are you looking? Are you seeing? Right? Are you studying the tape? I don't need to dehumanize white people in America because of Charlie Kirk or the GOP or the Trump administration. I don't need to do that. That does nothing for me. I understand that people like that will always exist. It's our acceptance of it that is the problem. It's one thing that exists on the margins. It's another thing that it's in our White House, that it's in our policies. And if we can't look at why and how we got here, then we're already lost. Well, some of y'all, because honestly, when we fight, we win. I don't know what to say. But I found it so disturbing. Ezra can't, that moment, he can't empathize with other people. I'll end with this because he raised a really important point, okay? And you've heard me say something similar. I just want you to listen really quickly to this, one little piece on, what Ezra had to say on transness.
A majority of the country believes things about trans people, about what policy should be towards trans people, about what language is acceptable to trans people, that we would see as fundamentally and morally wrong.
Right.
And what politically, not in a column or something, but politically, should our relationship with those people be? Do we win them over? Do we compromise with them? This feels like a very salient question. The Republican Party is going to make sure this is a relentlessly salient question.
Right.
So
I agree with that.
Where does the approach leave us? Right? Where do we go on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Look, I think a couple things. I think, again, look, my tradition is the only thing I have a reference point for, so I'm sorry to keep going back to this. But when I look at the times that we have lost, if I think specifically about the Black tradition, for instance, it's hard for me to say politically they did something wrong. You know what I mean? Reconstruction falls. What was the thing that should have been done?
Okay, so after this point, Ezra asks a really important question around transness, because you see that Coates has now referenced both the Black tradition, and there's this thing around transness. You know, there are people on the other side who believe that it's fundamentally and morally wrong that they're there. And right after this point, Ezra says, but maybe not so much we focus on the feelings, but we have to care about the feelings of trans people so much, and not that he didn't care, but he was saying we'd have to care about the feelings of trans people so much if, right? Instead, we focused on building actual political power so that their experiences were, protected, or their personhood essentially was protected, so they had some options. I actually thought that was a really important point, because he's talking again about building power. And Ezra says, I don't know where to do and where to go. And, I think, again, I wish that Ta-Nehisi had gotten really clear and been like, so in your not knowing, your knee-jerk reaction was to what? Like champion a Nazi? But he raises an important point on power. And here's the thing. If we don't figure out how to confront this thing that is hanging over our heads, we will never win in the way that we deserve to win. Because I agree with Ezra. It is about building power. And I could care less about pronouns. I do not and would never normalize the abuse of trans people. But we spent way too much time on policing and censoring language, which is honestly a liberal and white tradition, versus actually building power. Again, you can want to do and want to say whatever you want to me, but if you have power to do so, that's really different. I believe that we win this the second that we stop letting not knowing what to say or how to say it stop fucking us over. It's so simple when I say, I just got mad hearing it. But that's why we lose. That's why we can't build across from each other. And you know what? Ezra, people like him will always think that reaching across the aisle is the way, right? We know that it's who's already shoulder to shoulder with us and building up power there. We have to follow the Black tradition. Just like we did with racists. We said, hey, stop calling us niggers. And you know what they said? No niggers, we won't. And so we said, cool, fuck you. And we made it so fucking uncool. So unbelievably uncool to say it that they're even scared to say it now. But we did it. We did it by building out a vision for the world we wanted to live in. We did it by emphasizing joy and creativity and artistry. They make nothing and they have nothing except what we do. The second that we get our shit together, we win, and they know it. The only people who don't seem to know it is us. So, just want to say thank you so much for listening. And yeah, you know what? I'm going to be talking about race. Oh my God, I'm going to be talking about race. So much race. I find it endlessly interesting personally. I enjoy long-suffering whites. Those are my favorite kinds. Even still, get your shit together and fucking talk about it. If you feel a knee-jerk reaction to roll your eyes when you hear a Black person or anybody talk about racism, that's kind of normal. That's what this country has bred. But handle it. Because you can't grow. And if you don't grow, we don't. It's really simple. So I believe in us. We got this shit. I'm part of a tradition too. But my tradition is also beat that ass. There were just moments where I'm like, it should have been in a ring. No hate to the twink. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to Dark Woke. I want to give a shout out. We got a whole new thing going. Shout out to my lead producer, Corey. Shout out to the person who's going to be making this shit look good, Wit. And shout out to you all. I love you all so much. I really do. And thank you so much for listening. Okay, that's it. Bye.